Chances are that today you've woken up to news about the Paradise Papers, and this has been inundating your social media feeds, your newspapers, and your conversations with friends. But what exactly are these rather fun-sounding documents, and why is this such a big cause for concern? Well, the Paradise Papers are a collection of 13.4 million documents which have been obtained via a leak by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Now, these papers detail and provide information regarding investments in offshore entities. Now, this kind of financial tax planning is completely legal actually, and it's something which everyone is allowed to do, but as long as you do it within the framework of the law. And one of the big concerns which comes up with offshoring and sending money abroad is that it actually ends up becoming not just sort of tax planning, but tax evasion or tax avoidance, where you're illegally trying to save the amount of tax you pay. Or, for instance, money which is routed through foreign subsidiaries, through jurisdictions where there's lower taxes, often also have lower compliance requirements. So there's concerns about money laundering, about all sorts of fraudulent activities which arise when it comes to this sort of money. We have a number of Indians listed in this list. There's a total of 714 individuals and many companies which are now sitting alongside companies such as Apple, Samsung, Google, companies which have been known for a long time to be under the scanner when it comes to their offshoring. But when we come to India, we have to look at whether what's been done by these Indian companies or Indian individuals, is this legal or illegal? There are situations in which investing money outside is completely legal. For doing that, you have to comply with what's known as the Foreign Exchange Management Act and all the regulations which fall under it, which are governed by the RBI. There are certain entities into which you cannot actually make investments abroad. So for instance, if I were from India wishing to invest into an offshore entity which was involved in financial services or in the buying and selling of real estate, this would not be allowed by India. So if these Paradise Papers were to show that people have invested in offshore entities which do this kind of work, that would be an illegal thing which could be demonstrated. Or for instance, there is a limit to the amount of money which can be invested by an Indian abroad. So an Indian company can invest up to 400% of its net worth. This limit, if you exceed it, then you can't have that kind of investment, even if it's in an entirely legal and permitted sector. Furthermore, there are certain cases where there's requirements for RBI approval, such as when it comes to energy and the resources industry sector. We also have certain tax requirements which are applicable, or certain regulatory requirements which are applicable in terms of disclosure which has to be given when you're investing in an offshore entity. And if you fail to meet those requirements, such as, for instance, not listing an offshore asset in your tax returns, even if you're not having to pay tax on it, if you just don't mention it in your tax returns, that means you're falling foul of the law. If because of a particular offshore arrangement you've kind of fudged the amount, the value of a share sale, that again becomes an illegality under the income tax rules, because the value of that share sale affects the amount of tax you pay on it. What about assets in offshore entities which have to be disclosed at the time of filing election nominations, because a number of parliamentarians have come up? Now, this one is also quite interesting, because if you do have these offshore entities, you do need to disclose that you have ownership of them, you have shares in them. But if you were just a director of it, or you had something to do with it, you wouldn't necessarily have to mention this. Now this, as we've mentioned, for instance, has come up in the case of Jayant Sinha and R.K. Sinha, both BJP parliamentarians, one of whom is a union minister. Are we looking at a situation where the Paradise Papers have proved the guilt of certain people? No, because unfortunately, as the law stood at the time these documents refer to, there is nothing which makes any of this activity on the face of it illegal. As we've discussed, there are certain regulations which have to be complied with, and failure to comply with those would obviously be illegal. But the interesting thing about the Paradise Papers, much as with the Panama Papers, is that they've brought to light the sheer extent to which offshoring and the usage of offshore entities has permeated not just what's being done by corporations, but what's being done by wealthy individuals. And when you have the extent to which this kind of activity is taking place, there are increased concerns about whether compliance has taken place, whether the law is being actually followed. Now, for instance, the company from which the maximum amount of leaks has come forward is a law firm in Bermuda called Appleby. Now, they handle they're one of the oldest sort of private wealth offshoring firms, and they handle a huge amount of money, but they've had problems before with ensuring that when they take on these entities and when they do work for them, they actually ensure that these entities are actually complying with all legal requirements. So these are the concerns which have obviously arisen, and these are things which have been a matter of great concern, not just from a moral point of view, but from a legal and regulatory point of view over the last few years. There is action being taken in the International Forum at the OECD, to which India is party. There's also been a number of actions taken at domestic levels by a number of countries, including India, to ensure that you cannot sort of move money just around out of India and take it to other countries just to try and save your tax on it. So one of the ways in which we're looking at it is what's called a general anti-avoidance rule, which says that if, you know what, your money's actually been earned in India and you're now trying to sort of route it through some sort of corporate structure to send it to the Netherlands, then Mauritius, and then the Cayman Islands, this would not actually be legal anymore. Though under the old rules it was, 1st April 2017, all of this comes under the scanner a lot more. So at the end of the day, the Paradise Papers will hopefully help add and contribute to this conversation which is going on around the world about the morality and consequently and the legality of whether we should be having a situation where money keeps moving from countries to another, which has been found to actually increase inequality. We are still waiting to find more information, and we are examining the information available in the Paradise Papers, and we will continue to update you with our coverage here at the Quint.